for the people of the yes, good afternoon. This session is will be spoken in two countries, from two countries, Panama and England. So we welcome all the participants from the Caribbean community and the common market, CARICOM, to separate time to share with us in this presentation. Um, this presentation, during the presentation, all the participants will be mute. However, you are invited and feel free to interact with us, to ask us the word, the participation, and have active participation if you feel you would like to. The presentation is scheduled to last for 30 minutes, and there will be questions and answers during the presentation. However, as I told you, you are free to participate, and there is a button to include questions to send to us during the presentation. So yes, welcome to all for this Swift presentation from RISCCO. So we are very happy to have you here. Can you please help me passing the other? Yes, the content of this session includes an overview, a general reminder of the content of the Customer Security Controls Framework version 2023, some of the common mistakes that are made during controls implementation, some of the changes to the new version 2023, and how to get started. Next, please.
Okay, just we will turn off the camera so we can
Okay, thank you.
work
Yeah,
a little bit.
thank you. So then from this slide, what we can read here is that this is a program that has already completed 5 cycles, 5 years, where all the financial institutions have a mature process that is ready to be assessed by different independent assessors. So not just those who were very close to our institution. Now it's bring new incomers to evaluate, to assess our controls from different perspectives. So different point of views could be shared to improve the strength the controls in the program, in the cybersecurity program for Swift. We can change. This is the big framework for the timeline. It's important to begin very early in the year so we can have time to identify weaknesses and plan accordingly actions to strengthen whatever weakness have been identified during the evaluation, during the assessment process. And the institution needs time for some of these actions to be performed, and with enough time ahead, and then have time to reevaluate that the weakness has been closed, and we are really ready to submit a final KYCSA attestation on time, but also with all the controls in compliance. We can come for the next, please.
Before Raul and Ruben, before go ahead, good morning to all the participants, our friends in CARICOM. I have a question. It's Antonio Ayala, CEO from RISCCO for the region. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I have a question from the participant, and it's precisely in connection with the previous slide. The question is around, in the past, the self-assessment, it was performed by the information security or technology department within the SWIFT users, in most cases banks. Why now this assessment must to be performed for a independent entity within or outside the organization? Not quite sure if Raul or Ruben can respond to that question.
Well, I will take it. I'm at this moment having the word, so I will take advantage of this. I would say that the people who is involved in the organization, who have been seeing the implementation process, is very acquainted with the process, with the controls, with the people, could be biased with the resulting evaluation. And it's important that we face new assessors, as I told before in the other slide, that could bring new ways to enforce our controls, because we already have applied all the information that the security department from our organization has brought to our table. So that could be one of the reasons why we need to bring new people to enforce our processes.
Okay, I think we can move forward, Raul and Ruben.
Yeah, so in everything, when we are accustomed to see a process, a system, there are details that we could make as errors or have different perceptions, mistaken perceptions of things, especially when we are in a rush. And aligning this with the last slide, if we work under pressure, on the very tight timeline, the likelihood to make errors is greater. So in this case, we don't know if the person who was sent to install this phone was having a very high pressure of installing a quota for the amount of phones to be installed, that he just go and install the phone in the first place he saw it. But yes, it shows that we could, as humans, make mistakes when we are, especially when we are under pressure. Let's continue. Some of these misconceptions are to assume that, for example, and we have seen these reflections are shared based on real evaluations we have made. Some institutions feel that once they have passed some security frameworks reviews, like for example, PSI, CSS, and all the bank was involved, and they feel very mature and compliance with that framework, they feel that this SWIFT framework that is also mapped to that cybersecurity framework should be in compliance automatically, which is not necessarily true, because that implementation could help achieve the results of this framework, but not necessarily map all the weaknesses and risks that this framework brings to the table. The second point is expect compliance based on last year's results. If we pass the last result, the last assessment, it doesn't necessarily mean that all the controls are continue to be aligned with the operations, because the daily operations and the daily activities bring changes, and there are many things that are moved. There are many pressure, especially by these days, where the whole banking and financial system community is under pressure to be effective, and new risks are coming daily. This framework is also facing these challenges. That things that were true yesterday or the year before are not necessarily true at this moment. So it's important to make the review on time, plan ahead, so we could have time to arrange and organize and feed whatever needs to be fed before the time comes. And the last point for this slide is that people moves, people have vacations, the different level of awareness of one staff is not necessarily the same of the second in line or the person who comes to replace that one. So even if we have very good processes, flow charts, documentation, if the awareness of that resource that is coming to replace that the one who was doing the job for compliance the last year, not necessarily is going to bring the same results for a new assessment. And configuration changes are happening daily also. So this could be a driver of to bring the need to have a different approach in the assessment to identify weaknesses or non-compliance points. So we could pass to the next one. These are other very specific discussions or difference in perceptions, especially for, and this response, it's aligned for the question that Antonio asked before, that why we need to bring new people, new assessors, new independent assessors, where the cybersecurity department that we have been evaluating this framework during the last 5 years, and is things like this in Control 1.4, for example, internet restrictions. There are specific restrictions in the framework, but the framework also asks to make risk assessments of these. And in this point, the operations department sometimes have internet access for many different reasons, but the controls to lock those access and to ensure that only the authorized websites that these people should visit are not necessarily strong enough to ensure the protection of the assets inside the organization, inside the SWIFT segment. The other point 5, that talks about hardening systems. One point that we have seen is that the hardening is done, but then again, the time comes, the time happens, many changes happen inside the organization. We move things to the cloud, and then this hardening that was reviewed 3 or 4 months ago is not in place anymore. And point 6, that talks about integrity, and sometimes has to do with controls that the data has inside the database, but it's not true for some data that goes outside the database, files that need to be processed by the SWIFT network. And these segments where the data is exposed don't necessarily have strong controls to assured and ensured integrity. I see a question there, so let me stop a while to see. There is a question saying, how can internal auditors assist in ensuring that the organization gets a passing grade? Well, it's very aligned with the last question. Auditors inside the organization could be very good assessors for this framework, but the framework itself requires some experience, qualifications, and certifications to evaluate this framework. So one of them is having the certifications, and another one is that in the recent year, that person was involved in evaluating one of these similar frameworks to have like the criteria that this framework requires to make a non-biased assessment of the compliance and really be aligned with the framework against the SWIFT community and SWIFT itself and regulators. So I would say this is very important for the internal audit department to be ready to make an assessment that could go and help the organization to be in compliance with the framework by the end of the year.
Raul, let me interrupt. I have a question for another participant that is very aligned with the question that you have responded a few seconds ago. The question is in connection, what happened to the organization if the independent assessment within the bank is performed by a person with no experience in information security, risk management, or even SWIFT-related components?
Well, part of the errors made, and we have already seen that in our reviews before, is that the whole evaluation, the whole set of controls depend on analysis and professional criteria. And if the person doesn't have very detail-oriented skills for these controls and the spirit, what these controls are looking for, then the resulting analysis could be biased, could be devised from the objective, the risks that the framework requires to review. And this is something that we have seen also from security experts that work for the same organization and have some pressure from their chiefs, staff, and boards to approve the compliance with the framework. When a person that is more independent, because an internal auditor could have a degree of independence, but we as independent assessors outside the organization, the level of independence grows and is less tied with these boards to tweak some things to help the organization report compliance, where in reality there could be some things that are weak and require attention from internal organization.
Excellent, Raul. Just to add to your excellent response, just to clarify for all the participants that are with us this morning, and we at RISCCO, we need to be quite clear in connection what SWIFT said about this independent assessment. As Raul mentioned, this type of assessment can be performed by independent entity within the bank. That could be internal auditors, that could be the risk management area, or could be even the compliance department. But in addition to that, SWIFT said that any member of this department that will perform this review must to have a specific certification or experience, practical experience in information security, risk management, or even hacking techniques. That is the reason why, in the same way that SWIFT mentioned that independent assessment could be performed by internals in the bank, they said that in case if the organization don't have the resources with the skills, they have a directory where different companies that can be an independent as external assessor to perform this type of review. Just to recap, this review can be performed by internal staff within the bank if they have the experience and the certification that we mentioned. So that could be one interesting thing, because in some cases in the past 5 years that we at RISCCO, we have been performing this type of review. In some cases, banks believe that if information security or information technology, they are not going to be able to perform this type of review, only internal auditor can perform this. And that's in some ways true, but in some cases it's not, because we have been in many banks where the internal auditors have an extraordinary finance, accountant, and process auditor with serious experience in information systems. So that is something that we need to keep in mind. So I believe Raul and Ruben, we can move forward.
Yeah, we can pass to the next slide, please. Well, Ruben, sorry.
Yeah.
I will give you the word here.
Okay, thank you, Raul. Let's talk about changes in the Customer Security Control Framework for 2023. SWIFT, as you know, SWIFT every year is trying to improve all the security architecture around the whole network. As an example, or I tried this, I will put this picture here. At the left, you can see like a galaxy. His name is SMACS 0323. It has a very weird name, but that's a galaxy from the perspective, or look at from the perspective of the Hubble telescope. The Hubble telescope is a telescope that have a lot of years in the orbit. And from the right side, you can see the same galaxy from the length of the James Webb telescope. So what we try to present to you is that all the security controls that SWIFT are trying to implement during the last years, they are trying also because we need to improve it, all our security controls, because all these the risks are also are in evolution right now. So we need also to make it that evolution also to the security control that we have. So what changes happened in 2023? Well, the first one is some changes related with the principles that SWIFT has established. Right now, we will enter to each one in a few seconds. The other, they move a control from recommended to mandatory. That is the control 1.5, which is protected the customer environment. And also they add some support for the ASM models, which are some cryptographic systems that some backhand has implemented. And also they make some improvement and clarifications in various control, so we can try to be a little bit, so all the guidance could be a little bit easier to understand. The first change, as I mentioned, they merge two principles, but at the bottom, what they're trying to do is to prevent and try to prevent hackings or prevent unauthorized access, restricting the internet access and protecting critical system from the general IT department. I just want to recap something very important from all those objectives from SWIFT. SWIFT, first of all, try to protect our environment to avoid unauthorized access. That's the main goal of SWIFT. So anyone can access and try to do some fraud through his network. But the second thing that they try to prevent is that if someone get in the SWIFT network, they could not have enough access to perform something like a fraud. So that's the second level. And the third level that they have here is that if someone get access to their network and also escalate their privilege in the system, they need to detect that event and also try to cut it as soon as possible, and also to take all the remediations possible to try to avoid that fraud can spread around the globe. So this is the main goal of SWIFT, and that's why they try to improve their security controls year by year. So for example, control 1.5, as I mentioned, now is mandatory for architectures A4. The objective is to protect the customer connectivity or internet connectivity infrastructure from the general or external IT environment. They try to separate, as we did with the other architectures, they try to separate all the connectors related that we can see here. They try to separate all the systems related with SWIFT in that architecture from the rest of the IT general systems. So what they establish or they suggest in this control is that first we need to add or validate that we have firewalls in the middle of all the connection from those connectors that we have. This control is very similar to other controls in control 1.1, 1.2, 1.1. All the controls related with one, they are trying all to avoid connection from external sources. So for A4, need to establish firewalls around the architecture. Also try to separate VLANs, disconnect all these devices that are in this secure zone should be separated by VLANs. Also, it is possible, they suggest, that each connection between devices inside this security zone from Swift, they also pass through a firewall, and also it can validate the authorized ports and connections between them. So each entry and exit also from this zone should be monitored and controlled. Authentication system, it has to be independent from the general IT authentication. So for example, if we have a jump server, we could not have a jump server here who validates to the using the domain controller from the network. They need to have its own authentication process inside the security zone. We need to evaluate each IT service that should be connected to this zone and limit the connection between the components inside. Also, as you can see here, the jump server is a key also, so can people from the outside, users or administrator, can have access to this secure zone, they need to do it through a jump server. Also, what they include is the support for HSM. As I mentioned, is some new models that they are supporting and also added in the devices that are part of the secure zone. And they established some controls related with physical security. They included that we need to have security controls around the HSM. We need to establish a multi-factor authentication also with the HSM. With this point of multi-factor, Swift also recommends, and that's why it's very important, as Mr. Antonio and Mr. Lescano mentioned, it's very important about the experience we have, because this type of controls, this don't means that we need to apply multiple factor authentication to all the layers to connect to a safe environment. We need to figure out which is the best place to establish a multi-factor authentication, and according to the risk of each connection. So this is very important. But in this example, they are talking about the HSM. They need some multi-factor authentication, and also they include as a recommended controls that we need to do a personal background check process to the people who also manage that have administration to this type of device. Also, the software integrity, it has also to implement controls to verify the integrity of the software in this type of device. And also they include as a recommendation to also do penetration tests also to this type of device. Okay, so now, I don't know if, let me see if someone have another question.
Yes, we have another one, Ruben. And I believe that this question could be merged, because honestly there are two questions. One is, how long takes before this evaluation, thinking in mandatory requirements? In which month of the year is your recommendation start to perform this assessment?
Okay, this assessment it's dependent on the architecture, but it will take like 6 weeks more or less, the whole process, because the assessor need to identify all the controls in place, try to figure out all the information related with those controls, evidence about those controls, and try to test the control that if they are working as they said as they was established. So it will take like 6 weeks more or less. And the second question, Mr. Ayala, sorry.
It was in connection in which months
Okay.
do you recommend start this assessment?
Okay, so we recommend start this assessment from the most early as we could. And in some slides next, I will present you why it's important to do it, to start the most early that we can. But if I have to put like a deadline, we should start in maybe in July, because we need time. If we figure out, or if we identify an issue or a control that is not working as expected, we need time, or the bank need time to try to validate that control, make a remediation or an action plan, and we need to re-evaluate it. So that's why it's important to start the most early as we can.
Yes, just to add to the comment from Ruben. In our experience in the past, when we have been helping SWIFT users and banks in the region performing this assessment as independent as external assessor. In some cases, bank request to us perform this review in November. And keep in mind that organization must to send the assessment no later December 31st of this year. So just think about it. A bank call in November to Ruben or Raul or myself that they need to perform quickly this assessment. And just imagine that we can perform the assessment in 4 weeks, not 6, last Ruben mentioned. And in that assessment, we identify that the organization does not comply with maybe 5 or 6 of the mandatory requirements. In most cases, bank will not have time to remediate, as Ruben mentioned, those witnesses. And at the end, banks will need to inform to SWIFT that they not comply with this and this and this and this. That is the reason why Ruben and Raul and myself always recommend to organizations perform this assessment as soon as they can. Just imagine in the same case, the bank called me in July or August, and we identify 5 or 4 witnesses. They will have time to make the remediation, to create the process, to improve the procedures, even may change to security configuration. We can back again, review, and the bank will be able to say in December 31st that they comply with. That is why it's quite important to start this review as soon as they can. Back to you again, Ruben.
And also, it's not just that the bank, if it starts very late and do not comply with some controls are not comply with what SWIFT expect. It's not just to tell SWIFT that we are not complying. The issue here is that with the attestation, we send also not just our status, but other banks can see that status if we give access to them. But other banks can know that we have some issues with some controls, or we are not complying with all the controls. So maybe some banks can take action and you know, close doors. We don't want to do some transaction with some banks, because they have also that they can do that, because they can saw, if we give access, they can saw also how are our controls.
In
That's
addition
why,
to that, let me just, because quite important what Ruben is saying. In addition to that, SWIFT reserve the rights to inform
yeah,
to local regulator for banks if, in their opinion, the bank is quite bad complying with these requirements. I cannot remember any case where SWIFT has performed that, but if you read what they do and what they don't have to do, they have the rights to inform the local regulators in case, yeah.
I will have to intervene. Sorry, Antonio, to cut you in the middle of that statement. But SWIFT has gone a little beyond and has, as the same way we have access as independent assessors to a part of the websites, special websites sections for assessors and clients. Banks have their access. Also, regulators have online status of these reports. So it goes beyond the frequency where SWIFT can report to supervisors, but also supervisors will have online access to these results. So go ahead.
Go ahead, Ruben.
okay. So other things that, some other changes that they do, they move some specific controls inside. For example, the USB security about the USB, they move it to the control related with system hardening. In the past, in 2022 and 21, it was part of the control related with physical security. So they move it. The security updates, they take into consideration all the frameworks and experience, and they increase the time to in which companies or the banks need to remediate high risk vulnerabilities, and they move it to 3 months. In the past, it was 2 months. And also in malware protection, they consider that for example, computers in all operators PC, for example, they don't just we need to install a malware protection, not for Windows-based computers. So every computer that is inside that zone need to have a malware protection, even though it's a Windows, is a Linux, or whatever operating systems inside the security zone. So please take that into consideration. So now we will have we prepare a pool. So we will make you 2 questions. So you will see in your screen. So you can answer those questions. It will take like a minute, less than a minute. We will give you less than a minute so you can answer those questions, and then we will continue. Right now you have on your screen, you should have the poll. So please help us answering those questions. Let's take another few seconds more. Okay. So thank you for answering those questions. Let's continue again how to be prepared. We talked a lot about that a little bit early. So the first thing we need to do is to make this evaluation as soon as possible, as I mentioned. This is the key in case we identify or your internal teams identify any situations in which we are not complying with the controls. Sorry. So we suggest also if we can start maybe in the second quarter of the year, so you can have time. Sorry again. So you can have enough time to prepare all your action plans and also try to complete all the tasks. So in the last quarter of the year, we can perform, or you can perform another review and try to identify if all the controls are in comply. And then at the last, we need to publish all the resource, or the banks need to publish all the resource in the KYC SA. Why RISCCO? Well, as Mr. Ayala mentioned, RISCCO has, and as Raul also mentioned, for this process, it's very important the experience. And it's not just the experience about how we review controls, it's very important about how the experience in dealing with risk and also with technical experience, experience in infrastructure, in cybersecurity. Because in our experience, we identify several issues that only the experience can then give us the opportunity to identify that something was not working as the bank spec. So for us, it's very important that experience. So we have a roster of people here with the expertise, certifications, and also the experience in security and IT infrastructure. So as you can see, they have a lot of years of experience.
Yes, I believe just to add to Ruben's comments, we are very respectful for others independent external assessor that can perform this. But as Ruben mentioned, we in RISCCO, we also have maybe more than 20 years of experience performing different information security review, penetration testing, creating information IT risk management frameworks, models, performing different things. But most important, in the last 5, maybe 6 years, within RISCCO, we have a forensic digital units. And we in the past, and Ruben, Raul, and myself, we have performed forensic digital investigation related with SWIFT potential fraud. So when we perform this type of review, we only not provide to our customer experience performing this review. We also add experience in the potential witnesses that we see when we are performing forensic digital investigation related with different information security incident. That is a practical experience that we add to our customer when we perform this type of review. Back to you, Ruben.
Okay, so RISCCO is part of the SWIFT directory of assessors. We cover CARICOM, Central America, and also South America. So we have the opportunity to help some of you guys during this process also, if you want. So I don't know if we have another questions than the ones that we read first.
I would like to say to express an additional reflection based on last Antonio comment. And I'm now in England, and by these days it was very sounding news about the Credit Suisse, which was, because it doesn't exist anymore, part of the 30 big banks of the planet. One of the persons, one of the supervisors that were analyzing the situation said that the whole community, it's not more only to comply with the frameworks and the regulators' indications. It's more about risks. It's more about reflecting on the risk that we are managing. Because sometimes with Basilea, for example, we keep managing compliance, but the risks are present, and we are still ticking compliance with all the requirements we have. So bringing other eyes, new, fresh minds to our control infrastructure could be of help, not only to comply with SWIFT, but also to measure our internal risk health management. So go ahead, please.
Okay, so if we don't have any questions right now, or if you want, you can also send us a question directly to our emails. So you can send, in case you have any other questions before we close this, after we close this webinar, if you have another question, you can also send it through emails or by phone. So if we don't have any questions, no. Okay, so thank you so much for being part of this webinar. For us, it's very important to help you identify or to give you all the keys and recommendations that we can, so you can also comply with all the requirements and improve that SWIFT made to his customer security control framework. So thank you so much again from my side, Raul and Mr. Antonio Ayala and all the RISCCO team. Thank you so much again and have a nice day.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Ruben and Raul and Yoliso. And for
Thank you so much to all.
participants, to all the participants. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much.
Bye-bye.